Welcome back. You're watching Global Eye. Let's now turn our focus to the United States of America in a decision that could have significant impact on the Biden administration's powers to tackle the climate crisis. The U.S. Supreme Court has passed an order limiting the authority of the Environmental Protection Agency to set standards for power plants. The court ruled that United States federal air quality law does not give the EPA the power to set standards on climate-changing greenhouse gas emissions for existing power plants. The apex court held that only the Congress has the power to create regulations to limit emissions from power plants. The Environmental Protection Agency is an independent executive agency of the United States federal government tasked with environmental protection matters. This judgment comes as a setback to President Biden's agenda to combat climate change. Let me go across to Steve Baragona, science reporter for the Voice of America. Steve, thank you very much for joining us. Tell us, how does this Supreme Court order immediately curtail Joe Biden's climate action plan?
Well, it definitely makes things harder for the Biden administration to reach the goals that it set. When President Biden first came into office, he said he would like to reduce emissions from the United States by half by 2030. And what this does is it basically takes one tool off the table. Now, it's not a total ban on regulations. I mean, there's some concern that the court would basically strike down EPA's ability to regulate greenhouse gases at all. They did not do that. They just limited those powers. And they basically said, all you can do, all the administration can do is regulate emissions from individual power plants. What the administration had likely intended was trying to overhaul the entire sector, the entire electric generation sector. And the court said that is going too far. That is not what Congress is allowing you to do.
Right. And give us a sense of how the power plants, the existing power plants in the United States of America, will benefit from this order.
Well, you know, it's funny because the main target of the regulations dealing with power plants have been coal-fired power plants, and there are fewer and fewer of those remaining in the United States because natural gas, for one thing, has gotten a lot cheaper, and renewables, wind and solar, have gotten a lot cheaper. So those power plants have been closing for many years. And this is a big reason why US greenhouse gas emissions have been going down over recent years. Now, it's not fast enough. What this was trying to do, what the regulations were hoping to do, was kind of give that momentum a little push, a big push. And the existing power plants were not necessarily under immediate threat, but they, you know, the utilities do see the writing on the wall, and they are, you know, for the most part, they're closing these plants because they don't make economic sense anymore. But there are still plants out there. There are still a number of coal-fired power plants out there, and they will basically live to see, you know, several more years. Unless the administration comes up with another way to try to switch them off.
I'd also like to ask you, and this is something that we've seen with the overturning of the Roe versus Wade case as well, and Joe Biden has said that they will have to make legislative changes. What will be Joe Biden's approach now, considering that climate action was really one of the centerpieces of his political strategy, political campaign? So what kind of legislative steps can we expect from the White House to address this order on EPA?
Well, the White House has been trying to work with Congress to pass sweeping legislation to deal with climate change. There were some provisions in a big infrastructure bill that passed earlier this year. You know, that bill was hundreds of billions of dollars. It was big, and we're just starting to see how those investments are rolling out. There is another bill that is, you know, supposed to be targeted more specifically at climate change that is stalled. And there are negotiations with some other senators to try to pass something as part of the budget. The budget year in the U.S. ends in September, so they need to get something passed by September. There are provisions in that budget bill that would also deal with climate change, investments in electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging stations, and help for basically incentives to move this transition along. Those efforts are really unclear right now. What their fate is. It all basically hinges on one senator, Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia, the state that was the lead plaintiff in the case that the Supreme Court just issued, saying that you can't issue these regulations. Manchin is a Democrat. He is a member of the president's own party. He's not necessarily completely opposed to the climate regulations, but he is from a fossil fuel state. He has fossil fuel interests, and he is not looking for as aggressive action as many would like. There is cautious optimism that something will come out of this Congress by the end of the year, but that optimism kind of waxes and wanes, day by day almost, and it's really unclear at this point what can really get done.
All right, my final question, give us a sense of how this order was seen by climate activists and also energy companies and the US industry.
Yeah, I mean, in the environmental community, it was uniformly seen as a terrible decision and a huge setback for climate action. The view is that this is going to make it much harder for the U.S. to reach its goals, and that climate change is a huge issue that basically the court is saying that Congress needs to deal with this, and Congress has not been dealing with it. The Republican Party has shown very little interest in taking major action on climate change. The U.S. Congress is split right down the middle. So anything that, any efforts to get something done on this issue is now the court is saying has to be done through Congress. And that is very unlikely. And the environmentalists were hoping that this ruling would allow the administration to take action, since Congress is not taking action. And having taken this one tool off the table, they're very concerned about what the future holds. Now, the Environmental Protection Agency itself put out a statement after this saying, we're still in this fight. We're not done. We still have tools. We're going to continue. Right. And it just remains to be seen how they're going to, what they're going to do exactly. The utilities, certainly the coal-fired utilities, say this is a victory, clearly a victory, that is allowing access to affordable and accessible electric power. And at this point in the U.S., it's an interesting time because a lot of these power plants have shut down, and there are some concerns, especially this summer and the air conditioning season being upon us, that there's going to be real strain on the electric grid. And further shutdowns of coal-fired power plants, these power companies say, would put a lot of strain and they're on the system. And these plants are needed, they say, to keep your AC running through the summer.
Right. We've run out of time, but thank you very much, Stephen, for joining us, giving us that very important, very interesting perspective on the Supreme Court order. And clearly, it has major ramifications for Joe Biden's climate action plan. And let's see what happens in the weeks to come. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Global Eye. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.